Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're putting on our music historian hats to investigate a chart anomaly so staggering it practically defied the very laws of pop music nature in early 1967. We are talking about the ultimate David and Goliath story of the UK singles chart. So let's dive right in, because this isn't just a story about two songs. It's a story about a massive cultural collision, the sheer unpredictability of the music industry, and that exact moment an unstoppable force met a completely unexpected object. To truly wrap our heads around the scale of this upset, we've got to look at the scoreboard. By 1967, the Beatles had achieved an astonishing 11 consecutive #1 singles in the UK. Just think about that for a second. From Me to You, all the way through Eleanor Rigby and Yellow Submarine, they were on this streak of absolutely unparalleled cultural dominance. I mean, it wasn't just a chart record, it felt like an established fact of life. The Beatles release a single, and it goes to #1. Period. So naturally, their next release was expected to effortlessly make it 12. And this wasn't just any release either. It was a double A-side featuring Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever. We're talking two absolute masterpieces of the 20th century here. So what could possibly stop the most anticipated single of their entire career? Well, we're about to look at the exact moment a completely unexpected anomaly stopped the Fab Four cold in their tracks. Part 1, the unthinkable chart upset. The scene of the crime in February 1967. Okay, picture this. The Beatles had retreated to the studio, they'd stopped touring, and they were really pushing the boundaries of what pop music could even be. The whole world is waiting with bated breath for their next move. They dropped this psychedelic pop art masterpiece, and, well, the critics were totally amazed. The record shockingly stalled. It was literally locked at #2 on the UK charts for 6 consecutive weeks. To the public and the press, this was front-page news. It was the very first time since their debut that they missed that top spot. So who was the culprit? A song called Release Me, sung by a little-known, newly rebranded crooner named Engelbert Humperdinck. The guy was born Jerry Dorsey, and he'd been really struggling to find a hit. That is, until his manager, Gordon Mills, gave him the name of a 19th-century German composer and handed him this track. And against all odds, on March 2nd, 1967, Humperdinck officially took the #1 spot. Part 2. A Tale of Two Singles. The Musical Autopsy. Look at the sheer contrast here. It's like night and day. On one side, you have the Beatles pushing avant-garde pop boundaries, using incredibly complex studio techniques and writing intricate, youth-focused lyrics. Then, on the other side, you have Humperdinck. Release Me was originally a traditional country waltz shuffle written way back in 1949 by Eddie Miller and Robert Yount. Humperdinck's version was draped in this really soothing, traditional orchestration. Oh, and as a fun piece of classic rock trivia for you, it even featured a young session musician named Jimmy Page on guitar. But stylistically, it was squarely aimed at an adult audience. Part 3. The Palladium Plot Twist. The Butterfly Effect of Live Television. Now, Humperdinck's version of the song had actually been sitting on a shelf for 3 months. It was totally dead in the water, barely making a ripple. But then, fate stepped in. On day 1, a popular performer named Dickie Valentine falls ill. Day 2, Engelbert Humperdinck gets tapped as a last-minute substitute for Sunday Night at the London Palladium, which for context was basically the UK's equivalent of the Ed Sullivan Show. He goes out and sings Release Me to the entire viewing nation. And the reaction? It was a violent, immediate shift in public momentum. By day 3, orders for 80,000 copies of the single flooded in. It gets crazier. At the absolute height of the frenzy following that single television appearance, the record was selling a staggering 127,000 copies in a single day. Think about that sheer volume. It's the ultimate testament to the power of broadcast television in the 1960s. One performance literally altered the course of pop history overnight. Part 4. The Silent Majority Speaks. Examining the cultural divide of 1967. So you might be wondering, who exactly was buying this record in such massive numbers? Well, it wasn't the screaming teenagers who usually drove Beatlemania. The 1967 singles market was incredibly diverse. Older buyers, who were perhaps feeling a bit alienated by the increasingly experimental sounds of the 60s youth culture, were craving a return to traditional, adult-focused music. And here's the thing. These adults had jobs. They had real purchasing power. When they mobilized, they easily overpowered the cash-strapped teenagers who were out buying pop and rock records. This massive cultural divide is perfectly illustrated by the lyrics. While John and Paul were singing these abstract, poetic verses about nostalgic childhood memories in Liverpool, Humperdinck was delivering a frank 3-minute plea for divorce. Please release me, let me go. In 1967, UK divorce rates were actively climbing. For adults stuck in failing relationships, Humperdinck's smooth, sympathetic delivery struck an incredibly real chord. It was essentially adult contemporary music, perfectly matching an adult crisis. Part 5, Global Reach and 10 Guitars, the Worldwide Ripple Effects. And the impact wasn't just isolated to Britain either. This song turned Humperdinck into a global superstar. The record achieved #1 status in 9 different countries. It crossed the Atlantic and hit #4 on the US Billboard Hot 100, and it sold over 1.3 million copies in the UK alone. But honestly, the most impressive stat? It stayed in the UK Top 50 for a record-breaking 56 consecutive weeks. That is a chart longevity milestone that stood completely untouched until John Legend's All of Me finally broke it in 2014. Now here's a piece of chart trivia that is just absolutely fascinating. While Release Me was dominating the Northern Hemisphere, the single's B-side, a little track called 10 Guitars, took on this massive, totally unexpected cultural life of its own in a completely different part of the world. Down in New Zealand, 10 Guitars was organically adopted as a cultural anthem by the Maori population. During a period when a lot of young Maori folks were migrating from rural areas to cities for work, this B-side resonated deeply with them, and it became a total staple at parties and gatherings. It expanded the single's historical footprint in a way no record executive in London could have ever predicted. Section 6. The Legacy of a Footnote. The Aftermath of the Ultimate Chart Upset. Looking back, the legacy of this chart battle tells us so much about the fragility of pop dominance. Even the absolute kings of music can be toppled by the right song at the exact right time. But what's really remarkable is how the Beatles handled the defeat. There was no bitterness at all. They took it with gentlemanly grace. As Paul McCartney noted, they were simply occupying completely different musical lanes. They weren't trying to make traditional ballads, so losing out to one didn't invalidate their artistic direction. Actually, Ringo Starr later mentioned that losing that #1 spot kind of took some of the pressure off the band. However, legendary Beatles producer George Martin, he had a slightly different regret. He later admitted that bowing to industry pressure to issue a single and purposely keeping Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever off the upcoming S.G. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album was a dreadful mistake. Those songs belonged on the album, and putting them out as a standalone single only to be blocked by a crooner, yeah, that was a tough pill to swallow for the production team. Which brings us to the ultimate what if in music history. It leaves us with this tantalizing historical mystery. If performer Dickie Valentine hadn't gotten sick on that exact Sunday, preventing Engelbert Humperdinck from taking the Palladium stage, would Release Me have just stayed on the shelf? Would the Beatles have effortlessly coasted to their 12th straight #1? It just goes to show the biggest upsets in history are rarely planned. They're born from pure, unpredictable chance. So what do you think would have happened? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.